Let's get started. So welcome everyone to INSE 6120. Yeah, I said it right. I've never taught this course before. It's my first time. I was only assigned it maybe 2 weeks ago. So normally I would have a full Moodle and there would be like a lot of detail. But the honest truth is I'm going to try and figure out the course sort of as we go along. So right now I have a course outline up. I'll talk a little bit about the project. And then we'll spend most of the lecture reviewing 6110, which is a prerequisite to this course. Has everyone taken 6110? I think there's an option maybe to take them simultaneously. Yeah, okay. So this will, for those of you who have taken it before, it will be a review. For those of you who haven't, you'll get a preview. And it will also give you kind of like a table of contents for the things that you should know. You don't have to know all the inner details of everything, but anyways, I'll get to that when we get to it. Okay, so the Moodle's up. You should all have access. I'm hearing from the room that most of you do. If you don't, it's some condition just where maybe you signed up not in time and it will show up in a few days. There's a course outline, which I'll go through now. Okay, so my name's Jeremy. You can call me Jeremy. I'm fine with that. If that makes you uncomfortable, you can call me Professor Clark. My email's here. My website is here. We'll have office hours. They'll be virtual on Zoom. They'll start at 2 o'clock every Tuesday. The way office hours works is I'll put the link on Moodle. It's not there yet. If you have a question, you can join at 2. I have the same office hour for all 3 of my courses. And if there's students that are already there, there's like a waiting room, so you'll see that you're put in a waiting room. Unfortunately, there's no way for you to know, like, is it going to be 2 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or you can't see who else is in the waiting room. That's just how Zoom works. So just wait in the waiting room, and then eventually I'll let you in. They're one-on-one, so it's not a group thing. It's just if you specifically have questions for me. If nobody's there, I'll leave. Like I won't, it's not like an hour long. It's like come at 2, and as long as there's someone there, I'll stick around. But if it's like 5 after, 10 after 2 and everyone's gone or there's no one there, then I'll just leave. Okay? What else did I want to say? And you don't have to email me ahead of time and tell me that you're coming or anything like that. It's just drop in. So you just join the link. Okay? And it's also virtual, yeah.
How does that go?
So there'll be a Zoom link. I'll have it on Moodle. Okay. And so just Tuesday at 2, you click the Zoom link. Yeah. You'll see one of 3 things. You'll either see me, then we can talk. You'll see that you're put in the waiting room, then just wait. Or the other thing you might see is like host has not started meeting. That means I might have forgot. It happens. I apologize. What I really want to say about office hours is I'm available. We're going to have a break in the middle of class. You can ask me questions then. There's time after the class. I stick around. You can ask me questions then. If you have a question, you don't have to wait till Tuesday at 2 to ask me. If you can send me an email and articulate your question in email, send me an email. So normally office hours are empty. No one comes just because you have a million opportunities to ask me anyways. Okay. But if it's more of a personal thing, or like if it's hard to say, you want to, talk it out or something like that, the office hours are there. Okay. But if you go through the whole semester and never go to office hours once, it's not like you're missing out on anything necessarily. You probably will be talking to me during class and during breaks and things like that as well. Okay. And very happy to receive an email. I'd actually prefer just to send me an email and I can write a response at my leisure. But anyways. Okay, the calendar description is just, it's what's in the, it's what was set in stone, I don't know, 10 years ago when this course was first offered. That said, I will try and follow it. So we're going to see a lot of the stuff that's here, maybe not 100% of everything, but the course will more or less try and cover a lot of the stuff that's here. Okay, as mentioned, a prerequisite is cryptography or co-requisite. And this course does use it. So I'm going to try and review everything that we need to know. The way it works is in 6110, you learn what I call primitives. So they're like cryptographic operations. you can think of them as kind of like black boxes. What I really care about is kind of what goes in, what goes out, how they behave, what properties they give you. That's what I want to review today. How they work on the inside, how do they achieve those properties, you don't really need to understand for this course, okay? You just need to understand the black box itself. And in that course, though, you will learn you'll open up the black box and look and see how they learn on the inside, okay? So you should be comfortable with everything I say. Tons and tons of resources about crypto. You can ask ChatGPT, whatever. Like, you should have no problem like catching up on crypto stuff. There's not going to be like a coding component to this course, but I may show like little pieces of code or things like that, and we may look at it, and then understanding crypto is the main thing. There's no textbook for the course, so the course will strictly be based on the lectures themselves. The lecture notes, because I haven't taught it before, I like to handwrite out like I was on a board. The difference, though, is I'm going to write it on a tablet, so you get a copy of it, and then you don't have to make a copy yourself. So after the lecture, what I'll do is I'll give you a PDF of what I wrote out. I'm also recording right now. It's recording my screen, so whatever you're seeing on the projector is being recorded as well. And I'll put that on YouTube, and then I'll put the link or the YouTube video on Moodle as well. So if you miss a lecture, say you're traveling or something like that, it's no problem. Just, you can't ask questions, obviously, but aside from that, you can catch up and watch the lectures themselves. There's a slight, 1% chance that maybe something happens with the recording. Sometimes it happens. And so it is a best effort, so I'm not guaranteeing 100% that it, say a lecture gets lost for some reason, it's still the onus is on you to be able to know what the material was that was covered in class. But I have been recording lectures for, I don't know, probably 7 years, 3-4 courses a year, and I've never lost a lecture once. Okay, so it's pretty reliable, but just saying that. Usually I've taught courses multiple times, and so if I ever lost a lecture, I could just give you the lecture from last year. Unfortunately, this is the first year I'm teaching, so I don't have a lecture from last year. But the notes will definitely be available as well. Okay, so keep that in mind. The grading scheme is pretty simple. We'll have a midterm. We'll write it in class. I don't have a date for you. I'll have a date for you next week. Okay, so I'll tell you it's either going to be the week before reading week or the week after. I haven't actually looked up when reading week is, honestly. And the week after reading week, if it's the week I think it is, I'm at a conference, so I won't be available that week anyways. So the midterm, just wait a week and I'll tell you. But it's something, we'll come to class, we'll write it. We won't use the whole class to write it. There won't be a lecture as well, but it will be sort of a shorter, think more like a quiz, probably just multiple choice, something like maybe 10, 15 questions. Some people are registered with the Accessibility Center and you have a longer time allocation to write things. If that's the case, you can talk to me. But because we don't use the whole class period, you can just stay after and continue writing, or we can do some other accommodation, but you have to come and talk to me about that. But anyways, that will be the midterm. It will be in class. The final exam will be during the scheduled period for final exams. Because most of you have taken a prerequisite, you already know this, but some of you might be new. So Concordia, I don't choose the date. I have no control over the exam itself. It's chosen by Concordia itself. There is an exam period, and let's look at it together, because I will also answer the question of when reading week is. So this is a good website to bookmark if you don't have it. It has the whole graduate calendar and everything. So reading week is March 2nd. And examinations begin April 16th and they end May 3rd. And so what that means is the exam could be scheduled anytime between those two dates. So if you're going to make travel plans or things like that, wait until the exam schedule is out. Once the exam schedule is out, then go ahead and do it. But for now, you should block off that full period of time because the exam could fall anywhere in there, and I can't do anything to help you if you can't make the exam itself. I can't move the exam anyways. Okay, and then how do you know? Usually, I think they probably email you, but the exam, whoops. The exam will be, I'll put all these links on Moodle. I didn't get a chance to do it yet. I'll just open, this will be like a little blurb that I'll put on the course for this year. This is just from my other course last year. But the exam period's here, so it has that link to that calendar, and then the schedule will be posted on this link. Okay, so you can see the final exams for last year for fall are here, and eventually they'll post them for the winter. When do they post them? Usually takes at least a month, but no longer than 2 months. So think about like February, maybe early mid-February. That's when you'll sort of know when the final exam is. Okay, so hold off on any travel plans and things like that until you know when it is. This is from my other course, but I'm going to run it the same way here. So I'll just tell you it now, and then I'll copy it over. So the exam will be in person. It's a 3-hour slot. I try not to write super long exams, so I try to write an exam that's maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours. But if you want to stay for the full 3 hours, you can. The question format will be short answer, true, false, multiple choice. The multiple choice you'll do on a Scantron form. This will apply to the midterm as well. So a Scantron form is one where there's like the bubbles like A, B, C, D, and for multiple choice you fill it in. I take the sheet, a machine marks it, and then that's how you get your grade. And this is the most important thing that I want to emphasize is that for all exams, midterms, finals, you have a cheat sheet. So anything you want to write down, you can write down on the paper, just one piece of paper, but front and back. You can make it small. You can bring a magnifying glass. I don't care. The only reason it's one paper is just because otherwise people are like shuffling around too much stuff, and it gets noisy and things like that. So one sheet of paper. But the emphasis here is I'm not going to ask you to memorize anything. Okay, so if there's anything where you're like, should I memorize this? Just put it on your cheat sheet. That's what it's there for. Okay, so the exams will be more conceptual. They'll ask you about things. It's not going to be a straight memorization kinds of questions.
So the sheet is just one side?
Sorry, I meant two-sided. So you can have front and back.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if English isn't your first language, you can bring a dictionary. This you might actually need a calculator. I don't know. We'll go through it and see. But I think probably you won't need a calculator, but you can always bring one just in case. But once we get closer to the final exam, I'll go through all these details again and do it. Okay, questions about the final exam?
So, sir, the percentage of the final exam is 50%?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, this is from last year. Yeah, so this is just something I've used in other courses. Yeah, so 50 final, 20 midterm, 20 project, and we'll do an assignment of some sort. Yeah, okay. The project I'll talk about in a second. The assignment, I haven't decided yet what we'll do. I'm thinking, because it's the first time teaching, I'll just do one assignment. Usually I do 2 assignments. So I'll probably do one. We'll have the midterm before reading week and then the assignment after, or vice versa. We'll have the assignment early and then have the midterm, but they won't overlap at all. And you'll have like 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks to like know what the assignment is and see it and understand when it's due and things like that. And it won't overlap with the exam for that full 2 weeks, not just when the assignment's due itself. Okay, so I have to figure that out still. This is my sort of intention for how we might go through it. I put midterm at week 7. That's not a guarantee. I'm not promising that. I just had to put it somewhere. And we might do it at week 6. I have to look at a calendar. But like I say, by next week, I'll have it on Moodle when it is. And then I'll change this as well so it matches. So today we'll talk about crypto. We're going to cover, so the course itself, I might as well kind of write this down. So the course is called Crypto Protocols and Network Securities. So the way I see the course is kind of like a Venn diagram. You have like kind of like advanced crypto, basically things that wouldn't be covered in 6110 because there isn't time. And then you have network security. And then a lot of what we'll do is in this gap here. So I think we're going to spend about I'll try and spend about 6 lectures on things that intersect these two things. And then I'll maybe do 2 lectures here and 2 lectures here. One lecture will be the midterm, and then there's a lecture sort of left over as kind of like slack in case things run over time or things like that, okay? So this is an intention, not necessarily a promise. So with that in mind, the things I want to cover are things like HTTPS, so secure tunnels. I want to talk about like logging in. How does that work? How do you authenticate to websites? How does the crypto work? Once you are logged in and authenticated, how to, like say you want to access a file, how does the system figure out whether you have permission to access it? Things like that we'll talk about. So things like Kerberos, Zero Trust, HTTPS is what we'll talk about next class. I'll talk about messaging, so email, secure messaging, WhatsApp, Signal. We might look at some like deniable messaging. Another thing I might bump up, I'm not sure when to talk about it because it's really important, is surveillance. So like how does someone surveil your network connections? So like how do they get in the middle of your network connections? Like there's BGN, you can hack BGN, and there's a bunch of different ways. We'll talk about Wi-Fi. Yeah, like a man in the middle. So how do you become a man in the middle, essentially? And then we'll talk about what you can do to defend against it. Censorship resistance, so things like Tor and things like that. Some of you have definitely taken 6150 with me. So these are 2 topics I talk about in that course there. Just for your interest, here we're going to focus on the protocol itself. It's like everything we skip when in 6150. So in 6150, I talk a lot about the PKI and things like that, but we don't really talk about the protocol. And then Tor we just briefly touch on, so I'll talk more about the details of the crypto. Then we'll do a couple lectures on just straight network security. So we'll have a bunch of things around availability, so denial of service, distributed denial of service, botnets, and then how do you combat it, CDNs, that kind of thing. And then we'll talk about infiltration and exfiltration, which is basically how do you intrude on a network. And it won't be from the systems perspective. It's not from how do I set my server up so it's hardened against these intrusions. It's more like someone managed to intrude somehow. How do I detect it? How do I stop it? How do I see them coming in? How do I see them going out? Going out is also a big deal because a lot of times people, when they break into a network, they want to steal things. What they want to steal could be terabytes of data. It's not that easy to get terabytes of data out of a network without it being detected as well. Okay. And then as time allows, we'll talk a bit about advanced crypto. So these are some advanced cryptos that aren't necessarily directly related to networks, but they are, so this should actually say network protocols, I guess. They're protocols, just not network protocols. And so we may talk about things like fully homomorphic encryption, multi-party computation, zero-knowledge proofs. If you're interested in zero-knowledge proofs, I'll plug my other course. So I have another course that I'm teaching this term, brand new course, and it's going to be just about zero-knowledge proofs. So it's INSE 6630. It's now on Thursdays. It was actually supposed to be now, but because I'm teaching this now, it got moved. And anyways, it's going to be a course entirely about this topic. This topic is like really popular right now. It's there's a lot of companies that are interested in it. And the topic itself is old, like zero-knowledge proofs go back to the 1980s and the 1990s, but there's a sort of modern type of proof that has become popular in the last 5 years. A lot of tooling was built for it. And another course I teach is on blockchain technology. So that's like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And so imagine like 10 years ago, I told you should take a course on blockchain or cryptocurrencies. You might say, I've never heard of Bitcoin, or maybe I've heard a little bit about it. Now we understand that that's a pretty big space. So this zero knowledge is kind of like that. It's kind of like what Bitcoin was 10 years ago. It's just a heating up. And a lot of the companies that are involved in the blockchain space are also involved in that. So that's my pitch. Anyways. Okay, and then these 3 topics would probably take 2 lectures, and then we'll see how we go. Okay, so this is again a plan. It's tentative. I might make adjustments. Also, if there's something you really want, you can also talk to me about that too, and maybe I'll adjust it to include it as well. Okay, this stuff is just kind of boilerplate stuff. I won't go through it in detail. And there's some links here to other resources that might be useful for you. Okay, so setting aside the project, which I'll talk about in a second, is there any questions about any of this stuff?
So the final is going to be cumulative, like well, of course is 50%.
That's right. Yeah. So the way the course structures is the midterm will be in the middle somewhere. So the midterm is obviously only going to cover the material up to the midterm. The final, sometimes people have to miss a midterm for various reasons, and what we do is we push their grade, like we count whatever their midterm was with the final. That's the standard response. And so if the final only covered from the midterm to the end, then those students wouldn't be tested at all on the first material. So it's actually like a Concordia policy that finals have to cover 100% of the course. That said, the emphasis will be on the post-midterm stuff. So if you want to think percentages, think about maybe like 25% would be up to the midterm, and then 75% would be on the stuff after, roughly speaking. But yeah. Yeah.
Is it just one assignment?
Yeah, so I'm just going to do one, just because I haven't taught it before, and I don't have assignments ready to go like I do in my other courses. So I'll just do one and see how it goes. Yeah. I'm not sure what it will be either. I'll try and come back to you next week with stronger answers about what the assignment looks like. Like, I'm not sure if it's going to be more of a hands-on thing, a lab thing, a write-up, that kind of thing. I'm not sure yet. Yeah.
So the midterm would cover which weeks?
So we'll cover everything up to the midterm week itself. So
it's 7.
yeah, so let's say it's on week 7. Like I mentioned, this isn't a guarantee. I have to look at a calendar and try and position it because I'm traveling around this time. But let's say it is indeed on week 7, then it would cover weeks 1 to 6. Sometimes I might just do week 1 to 5, just in case you haven't caught up, but that type of thing, yeah. But obviously, like a week before the midterm, I'll be telling you a lot more about the midterm itself, yeah. Okay, other questions? Okay. The project I'll talk a little bit about, and then next week also I'll ask for your patience on the project itself. So this is what I know about the project, and then there's the big question I don't know is, I don't know what I'm going to ask you to do for the project topic itself. So usually in my courses it's open, so you can choose any topic itself. Related to the course, yeah. But sometimes I've noticed, like the other professors that have taught this course, they actually prescribe topics. And so they give you topics. And then you always have the option of choosing your own topic, but you have to clear it with me. So that will always be on the table. If there's something you really want to do and it fits within the scope of it, you come have a conversation with me, then you can do that topic. Otherwise, I'll either give you some ideas of topics, or it will just be a free-for-all and you can choose what you want. So I haven't decided yet. I have to sit down and see if I can come up with some good projects that you could do, okay? So this is more about the logistics of the project itself, not about the topic itself. I'll talk about the topic next week. So the project, it will be a written report, PDF format. You'll upload it on Moodle. It will be due the last day of class. Between now and the day that you submit the project, you do not have to talk to me at all about your project, okay? I expect that PDF on the last day of class, and then that's it. Yeah, there's no progress report, there's no topics or anything like that. If I make it such that if you don't choose from a list of topics, you have to come talk to me, then you would have to talk to me about what you want to do it on. But other than that, I'm not babysitting the projects at all, okay? You can do a group project or an individual. It doesn't matter. It's up to you to choose, okay? So groups up to 4 are fine with me. If you really need to go over 4 because you have a great idea, then come talk to me and I'll either say yes or no. But yeah, so you can work individually, you can work in groups up to 4. When I read the projects, I do consider how many people wrote them. Okay, so if I see a project with 4 names on it, my expectations are more than if I see a project with a single name on it. Okay, so bear that in mind. The people ask, like, is it better to work individually or a group? So based on last term, some of the highest marks were groups of 4 and some of the highest marks were single people. Okay, so I don't think there's like a correlation. So if you say you want to work alone, you don't know anyone in the class, you're not at a disadvantage, right? If you're like, I have a really great idea, I need 3 of my friends to help me with this, you're not at a disadvantage either. Okay, so there's no advantage or disadvantage. So choose your groups like sort of naturally, whatever fits the topic that you want. Find people that complement the skills that you have and things like that. But what I don't want is I don't want one person to write the project and then you put 3 of your friends' names on it, because then you're all going to get a bad mark if it looks like one person did that amount of work. Okay, so that's the only thing that I'm trying to discourage, is just having people free ride off of the efforts of others. Okay. The report itself, PDF, I don't care about format. Use some format. You can write it in Word. You can write it in LaTeX. It doesn't matter. 8 pages minimum or maximum. That's just to keep me sane, because I have to read all of these. And as you can imagine, I think there's 60 students times 8 pages. It's a lot. Now, some of them will be groups, so there'll be a little less projects, but still a lot of reading. I have 3 courses. I have projects for all 3 courses, and everyone wants their marks like within 3 days of their final or whatever. And so anyways, that's why that restriction is in place. You can say a lot in a little amount of space. So I write papers for a living, more or less. Sometimes we have short papers. We only have 4 pages or 6 pages. It's fine. Like, if the quality is there, you find a way to say it in less space. Okay. And sometimes a shorter paper is stronger because there's not a lot of fluff and things like that. If you need to go over 8 pages, say you have a bunch of references and they're spilling onto the 9th page, you don't have to ask me about that. I don't care. Like, if it's 9 pages instead of 8 pages or 8.5 pages or something like that, I don't care. Okay. If it's 12 pages, I'd like a heads up ahead of time. Okay. I'm not saying I won't accept a 12-page paper, but tell me ahead of time that, and give me a good reason why you can't fit it possibly into 8 pages. Then I'll probably let you have your 12 pages or whatever. Okay. So it's not like a strict requirement, but do try and keep it like within 8, more or less. And if you need more, anytime you want to bend a rule of this projects, you can bend it if you ask me. Okay, I just want good stuff at the end of the day. And so, yeah. Any template is fine. Okay, plagiarism is something I want to talk about. It's usually an issue every year. Okay, so plagiarism, you probably all know what it is. So if I say I see some text, I like it, I want to copy and paste it into my report, I don't quote it, I don't cite it, I present it as if I wrote it even though I did not write it, that's plagiarism. That's a pretty clear-cut case of plagiarism. If I copy and paste the text in and I change the words, maybe I change the grammar, but the meaning's still the same, the kind of logical flow is still the same, that's still considered plagiarism. It's considered mosaic plagiarism, but it's still considered plagiarism, okay? So what do? You have to learn stuff from somewhere. So what are you doing? So you're going to do 2 things. So the first thing you're going to do is, if you read something and you want to understand it and repeat it, don't copy and paste and edit it. Just understand it, get it out of sight, and then recite it back in your own words. Okay, then you won't have a problem. Second thing you can do is cite it. Okay, so just write the citation. And then I said 2 things, but there's 3 things. The third thing is, if you do want to quote something, you just tell me in the writing of the paper itself where you got the idea from. So I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a list of 5 things, like 5 properties that some system has. Someone else came up with those 5 properties. I didn't come up with those 5 properties. I want to use, but like, do I have to change them? Do I have to have a 6 or something so it's not plagiarism? No, I can use those 5 properties. I'll just write in the paper, the 5 properties of this, due to this paper are, and then now it's clear from the writing itself that what I'm talking about I got from that paper, right? They're not my own. I didn't come up with these 5 things, okay? And your paper can be very conversational. You don't have to write in a very formal way. So if you want to say something like this, the ideas from this passage are from this paper, you literally write that. Like whatever you would tell me in a conversation about where you got the ideas from, you just write it into the paper itself. So the paper itself sort of explains where you're getting things from, just in line itself, okay? And the citations don't have to follow any format. They don't have to be in a specific, MLA style or anything like that. As long as I can read the citation and know what you're talking about, then that's fine. That's all I need. And then the other thing too is you can't copy projects from previous years as well. So that should be a given. Moodle does detection for that. So you'll see when you submit it, there's some detection, and it actually depends. So maybe if the professors didn't turn it on last year, you might be able to get away with it. But if they had turned it on last year, then it will have a copy of it, and then it will flag it if you submit the same thing this year, or things that are close.
Not that I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Like if someone were to do that, you automatically fail the course?
So it's sort of it's on a discretionary basis. So I'll look at it and see. So I won't promise anything in terms of it. Technically, the strongest thing is I'm supposed to report it to the department, and then I'm actually not supposed to be involved. So I just report it, the department takes over. They have an office that handles this kind of thing. And so, yeah, you don't want to go down that path. So the rules are the first time there's some penalty that's less than expulsion. So it could be a 0 on the assignment. It could be a fail in the course. There's different things, and it depends a little bit on the circumstances. Second offense, if it's separated from the first offense, like it's not 2 offenses in one. If it's like you did the first offense, you learned what the consequences are, and then you did it a second time, the default is expulsion. But there is a tribunal process and things like that. And I've sat on the tribunal, that's why I know all these like little details. But that's the default, like that's what the letter of the articles say is expulsion for a second offense. Yeah. But anyways, you don't want any offenses at all. And it does get put on your record, student record. It doesn't get put on your transcript, but it gets put on your student record. And they're apparently different things, and I don't know the whole differences between them. But anyways, don't go down that path. It's better to take a 0 on something. Like say you have no time to do it, and you're like, should I take a 0 on it, or should I try, to do something that could get caught? It's much, much better to just take a 0. Yeah, it's way better, like for everything. Yeah. Okay. So that's plagiarism. Another thing that's kind of related to plagiarism is like ChatGPT, Gen AI kind of tools. So I have a policy that's only for me. It's for my courses, but you're not going to get this policy in other courses. So it's not a department policy or Concordia policy. And so other professors, you can't say, well, Jeremy lets this happen and expect that other profs are going to follow this. So this is just for this course itself. I don't care if you use ChatGPT, is the short end of it. But what I do care about is I want you to tell me that you used it. And I want you to include a transcript of what you did. Okay? Other than that, you're free to use it. I use it all the time. And I expect you to use it, honestly. Like if you want to learn something, it's probably the best, quickest way to learn it. It's tailored to you. So you tell it, what you understand and what you don't understand, and then it will only explain the things that you don't understand. Okay?
What do you mean by what the first thing you said about the transcript?
Yeah, okay, so I'll go through the details. All right, so some AI tools, most of them, ChatGPT is the one I use. I think most of them give you the option of saving a transcript, basically, of the conversation. So what I'll ask you to do is when you get started on your project, create one. You can have as many chat windows as possible, but one would be ideal. and you'll make that your project chat window. And then everything you talk about with ChatGPT about the project will happen within that window itself. I realize if there's team members, you might have a couple, although there are ways of sharing like a transcript and things like that. And if the tool does not let you save a transcript, then I'd ask you not to use that tool. So there's lots that do, so find a tool that does use it. Then when you submit your project, I want a paragraph at the end. And it basically just says, I didn't use Gen AI at all, or I used it, and give me a rough sense of what you used it for. Like we talked about the project, or I didn't understand things, so it helped me understand it. I gave it a draft and it helped me like proofread it and things like that. And then paste the links to the transcripts themselves in the paper itself, okay? And if you do all of that, what I promise you is you're not going to get a 0 or reported for academic dishonesty. Even if I open your transcript and it's literally like, I need a project for this course, can you write the entire thing for me? Okay? If I see that, you'll get a bad mark, okay? But you're not going to get expelled or reported or anything like that, okay? That is something you're allowed to do. What I'm looking for is the effort that you put in. So I want to see that you made effort to understand the topic yourself. You're not just repeating things that it told you and believing that they're true. You're really trying to elevate your own understanding of the topic. And if I see that, then I'm happy with it. And I'm also just curious how people use Gen AI and always looking for tips on how to use it better and things like that. So, okay. And so, yeah, so your grade is based on demonstrating that you understand the topic. And this policy is only, sorry, I copy and paste this from my other course, but it's, any course you take with me will have the same policy, but it's not necessarily the policy for any other professors you'll have in CISE or elsewhere. Okay, questions about that? Yeah.
If I understand correctly, by transcripts, you mean the links to the chats?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Exactly, yeah, thanks, yeah. So the link to the chat window itself, yeah. And if, like, for some reason, like, say it gets lost, sometimes there's weird things, like you do an audio message and then it can't produce it, then just copy and paste it into another document or something like that. But do a best effort, yeah. There was a question, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, you introduced that Gen AI part like 3 semesters ago.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that quality of papers becoming better? Or?
I have actually, yeah. So believe it or not, I think they're more interesting. I actually think students don't use it enough. I feel like they could make it even more interesting. The other thing, the writing quality is generally increased too. So like, I don't care anyways. Like I don't take marks off like if you misspell words or your grammar's bad, and there's so many people that English is your second language anyways. So I don't even care about that. But those types of things also get polished a lot now because people will run it through a tool, or they'll have a tool as they write it out, kind of thing. But still, I think there is a gap. Like it's not like every project is knocking it out of the park, I would say. So it's there's still stuff that could be done. And the best part of a project is really the idea kind of behind it. And that's like what makes a good project. The execution's important, but it's more the idea. And you can use Gen AI to come up with ideas, but people don't. They want to start with their idea and then just use it to help them understand it, write it, that kind of thing. Yeah. But part of the motivation for perhaps next week I'll tell you is picking topics is I might pick topics that like it's a lot harder to just ask ChatGPT to write the whole thing for you. Okay, other questions about that? Okay, and then there's a bit about grading. I'll just go through this quickly. So like the topic of the paper itself is really important. I really care about the topic. I like it. And then if you have a good topic, then what you talk about and what you don't talk about is clear from the topic itself. One mistake that students make is they kind of wander around. Like they start talking about this, then they talk about that. Or the level of detail varies. It's like really high level, and then there's like a lot of detail about like something that's not really that important, and then it kind of goes back to high level details and things like that. So like having a good kind of scope for the paper, a good level all the way through is important.
So is there going to be any type of like coding to do at all, like real project, like a real application involved, or is it really just doing a research on something?
Okay, so that will definitely be an option. That will be given to you as an option, regardless of what I decide. So if you want to do programming, let me go to this. So technicality, I want sort of grad level technicality. Technicality means different things. So if you're doing something research, it means that you don't skip details because they get hard, right? You like go through the details and you explain everything, even though it would be a lot easier to sort of hand wave it away. But if you do code, then technical could mean, the code itself. In this course, because it's like math, crypto, you could do something more mathematical as well. So that would be another way. So technicality doesn't really imply anything. But what I'll do is I'll definitely have enough options within the project that if you want to do an implementation, you can do an implementation. If you want to do research, you can do research. If you want to do something more mathematical, you can do something more mathematical. Yeah.
Are you planning for a project demo at the end of the course?
So I won't do that. I don't, yeah. So I know some professors do that, but I don't in my courses, yeah. So the only thing I expect from you is the PDF itself, and you'll upload it on Moodle, and that's it.
And if there's a coding, just like a GitHub.
Okay, yeah. So if you do coding, this is what, first off, I expect that in the course of the project itself, once I define the topics, I'll make this clearer. I expect you to go read academic papers. So that's sort of like the one thing that I'd like to see cited in your paper. If you go and read any academic paper that implements something, you'll get a feel for how you do it. So what you don't see in the paper is like the code itself. You might see like little snippets if it's like important, like how we handled this one specific thing, but it's more like a description of what the code does. There'll be a link usually to the code itself, usually on GitHub or something like that. And then the paper will be about the code itself. It won't be like a walkthrough of the code, or it won't even show you the code at all. Yeah, it's more about it. And so that's the standard approach that I would expect for an implementation type of thing. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is, while we're on the topic, everyone in the room is going to want a job at the end of this degree, right? And it's good to put things on CVs. And things that you implement are one thing that you could put on a CV that's very tangible. If you say, I wrote a course project on this topic, I don't know that people really care that much. But if you're like, here's a GitHub link to some code that I wrote, maybe it's a project or a group of people, that's something that's tangible. You put it on your CV, you describe what the thing does, the library or app or whatever it is. And then it's a way to like sort of pad out your resume while you're doing the course anyways, okay? So that's not to say you have to do coding. I'm not trying to push you in the coding direction, but that's one thing that it's a way of like kind of getting an extra thing out of something you have to do for the course anyway. You can have an extra thing for your CV. Another thing with coding too is you don't always have to start from scratch. It's the best, like the things that you will do in real world is you'll go get an existing code base and you'll modify it. Like you'll add your little bit to it. That is not considered plagiarism. Yeah. So you can, again, you'll fork it probably on GitHub, and then you'll go in and you'll make your changes. And that's how open source software works, period, kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, so it could get it into license issues, but that's usually when you redistribute it itself. So if you're doing it for educational purposes, there shouldn't be any licensing issues at all. If you want to turn around and get people to use it, then you might pay attention to that. Or sell it, then for sure, yeah. Okay, interpretation. So I spend a lot of time, when I read projects, I don't spend a lot of time understanding the project itself. I spend a lot of time thinking about, does the student understand what they're talking about? It's really easy to read things and kind of repeat it back without understanding it. Like I could tell you how a bunch of algorithms work because I read something about it, but I don't know how they work. I can repeat it, kind of thing, right? So that's the main thing I'm looking for. So any signals you can give to me that you really understand things, like finding new ways of explaining it or adding more explanation or working examples or whatever the case is, those signals are valuable to me when I mark the projects, okay? So I really want to understand, I want to know that you understood it yourself. You're not just repeating things that were generated by AI or that you sort of copied from other places. Not literally like plagiarized, but like you don't understand it, you're just sort of repeating it without understanding it. And then just something about the manuscript, like you use figures and sections and things like that. Okay. So that's what I wanted to say about the project. I'll come back next week and I'll have a concrete plan for the project topic itself. Setting that aside, is there any questions about the project? Or about anything before we jump in? Yeah. Yeah.
Do we still have option to choose our own
Mhm.
than those topics or?
Correct, yeah. So even if I prescribe a bunch of topics, I'll leave the door open for you to propose something. But normally when I teach, you come up with the topic yourself and you don't ever talk to me about it. You just show up with it done. But it will be more like, I'll get it cleared first. Yeah. Okay, other questions about anything? Okay. All right, let's then turn to the course itself. So eventually I might make slides, but for now I'm just going to sort of handwrite things out. Again, if you weren't here at the start of class, this is being recorded. It will be put on YouTube. You'll get a copy of the notes as well. So you can just sort of sit back and try and understand it. You can take the notes too. It's like whatever works for you with your learning style. Okay, so today I want to talk about a course that you've either taken or you're taking now. Okay, so cryptography. What did you guys learn in 6110, the one people who have took it? Just shout out anything that you remember that you learned. RSA. Okay, all right, these are good things. Keep it coming. Okay, I'm going to write down Diffie-Hellman. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to do it slightly different. Okay, RSA is an algorithm. What does it actually do, though? Aside from RSA is the people who invented a particular algorithm, but that algorithm has a purpose. Okay, so it's an encryption algorithm.
And for signatures too.
And for signatures. Okay, so there's two RSAs. There's one for encryption and one for, and asymmetric, I'll call it public key, and we'll work on these details later, but I'll talk about this. Okay, so public key encryption, digital signatures, okay, someone said Diffie-Hellman. What's it do, if anyone knows?
Key exchange.
Okay, so key exchange. Okay, what else did you learn? Okay, so hash functions. Say it louder.
Secret sharing.
Okay, so that's something we won't talk about, but it's cool that you did. Say it, sorry, again. Certificates, okay. Again, it's something we'll pack into here. AES? Yeah? Okay, so this is symmetric key encryption, or I'll just call it encryption. Actually, I'll call it symmetric key. Anything else come to mind? So there's one big kind of category that's missing that you definitely talked about, but you might not recognize it. Okay. Okay, so Max is the one that I was thinking of. PKI would kind of go in certs. We'll talk about it itself. And then, okay, there's a few other things. Okay, so I'm gonna rearrange this list slightly.
It's a key agreement protocol.
Yeah. So key exchange, key agreement are similar types of things. Yeah. So you can kind of use these indistinguishably. Although we probably at some point are going to look at Diffie-Hellman alternatives And we'll see the difference between agreement and exchange. Yeah. There's key transport as well. So they're kind of variants. Okay. Another thing, did you talk about random generator, pseudo-random generators? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. So that's another primitive that will become important for us. So I'll call it PRG. There's a thing that I'm sure you did not talk about, but we're going to see it sometimes, called an extractor. And then we'll do encryption, MAC, and then we'll do encryption public key. And signatures. Okay, so I want to compare some of these things, like what are, we're going to go through them one by one, but before we do, I just want to get like the bird's eye view of it. Let's start with, let's take these two. What's the difference between an encryption and a MAC? Or what do they have in common, or what's different about it? I'll accept either answer.
So the encryption is for because there's that CIA triangle that they talked about. So it's confidentiality, integrity, accessibility.
Yeah.
So I think encryption is more for confidentiality, and the MAC is more for integrity.
Okay, good. So CIA means, yeah, confidentiality, integrity, availability. Yeah, and then there's other ones that get added on. We, in this course, will talk about all three, but these crypto primitives only really do 2 of the 3, or of the 4 or 5. So they either do confidentiality or integrity. Now, those are words, buzzwords, but what does it actually mean?
It means confidentiality, which means nobody's going to be able to see your message. Yeah.
Okay. So I have a secret. I want to communicate it to someone else. I want that secret to say secret. Okay, the other person receives it. They learn the secret, but nobody in the middle that intercepts it should learn it. Okay, so we call that confidentiality. What about integrity?
No one can change the message.
Okay, perfect. So when I send the message and the person receives it, that person wants to know it's exactly what I sent. It wasn't changed in the middle. You said it a little strong. You said we can prevent it. Generally, you cannot prevent things. If there's someone in the middle, it is bits and bytes going across the wire. They can change those bits and bytes. What we settle for is detecting it. So when the person receives it, they'll detect that it was modified. They'll throw it away. But if the person keeps changing it, there's no way of pushing it through, kind of thing. So if you want to stop people from communicating, you can sit in the middle and just change their messages, and then they won't be able to communicate. So we'll talk about that like a little later when we talk about surveillance and censorship and things like that. Okay. So we said encryption is for confidentiality, and MACs are for integrity, right? Okay, I buy that.
MAC is also for authentication.
True. So it's more a use case of it itself, but I don't know. I sort of dispute that, but set that aside. It doesn't. Just between these two, if these are the only 2 options in the world, it's definitely not confidentiality. Yeah. Okay. Encryptions and signatures follow the same pattern. Okay. What's the difference between these 2 kinds of encryption? One of them has 1 key. So encryptions and MACs have 1 key, and encryption and signatures, public key encryption and signatures have 2 keys. Okay, we'll talk about what that means and why it matters. But basically, there's a 1 key version of confidentiality and integrity primitives, and there's a 2 key version of the same thing. Okay, 2 keys strictly better. We would use it all the time. The problem is it's slow.
Is that the public and private key?
Yeah. So the 2 keys here. Yeah. And we'll detail this out in a second. But at a high level, these 2 things are really slow. So what we like to do is use them as little as possible and use these 2 things as much as possible. If they were equally fast, we could throw away symmetric keys and MACs and just use digital signatures and public key encryption. Extractors, I'll consider more of a building block. A PRG arguably is a building block as well and a hash as well. So they don't really do either of these two. Hashes have a property that kind of corresponds to confidentiality and kind of corresponds to integrity that we'll talk about. But these three things I consider more like building blocks. I'll put BB for building blocks. So they have one property that is useful for integrity, and they have another property that's useful for confidentiality. We'll get to those properties in a second. Okay. Most of these are functions. So that means think of them as a box that's sitting on the table. You put some inputs in, you get some outputs out. Okay. And the one thing that like always shows up in crypto is you have these boxes where you can put inputs in and get outputs out, but you can't go backwards. You can't start with the output and go back and get the input, okay? So they work in one direction, but they don't work in another direction. So most of these primitives kind of follow that sort of type of thing. So we can think about who's allowed to run the function forward and who's allowed to run it backward. And this is just to help sort of distinguish why we have so many different primitives and things like that. So a hash function, you can go forward, but you can't go backwards, okay? Anyone can run it forward. No one can run it backward. A PRG.
Unless the collision is weak, right?
So that's something different. Save that question. Yeah, when we talk about it. Yeah. A PRG, you can run, or sorry, you need a key. You need this seed. It's kind of like a key. So I'll just say if you have the seed, you can run it forward. Generally, you can't run it backwards. Or you can't strictly run it backwards. So if you see the output of a PRG, you can't figure out what the seed is from the output. An extractor is more of a statistical thing. It's not really cryptographic. I'm just going to skip it for now. Encryption with one key, if you have the key, you can run it forward means encrypt messages, and run it backwards means decrypt. You can run it back, but you need the key, and it's the same key. Okay, MACs are the same. You run it forward with the MAC, you run it backwards. Backwards here kind of, I'm fudging it a bit. The way you check a MAC is actually by running it forward a second time, but we'll just pencil it in as this. And then for a public key, the idea is with encryption, anyone with a key that's public can run it forward, so they can encrypt, but only the person that has the secret key can run it backwards and decrypt. Signatures are reversed. So the forward direction would be to sign something, so you need the secret key to sign it, and you need the public key to verify it, yeah, which is kind of like running it backwards, okay? Anyways, this is not a hard science, but it's just meant to sort of show you why these things are different, and they're not all the same kind of primitive at all, okay? Is there any questions about this? We will go through them one by one. But. Okay. So let's start with hashes. Okay. So let's say there's a hash that's sitting there. It's a black box. What do I put into a hash function?
Anything.
Anything? Is it one thing or more than one thing?
What do you mean?
So it's a tricky question. Just try and answer it.
Just one thing.
Okay, so normally we think of it as just one input. Now you could concatenate a bunch of inputs together and give it to it, but I'm going to write it as one input. So normally we call a hash function H. Okay, it's a function. Functions have inputs and they have outputs. We can call the input X or message sometimes. Let's call it message. What do I get out of the hash function? Do I get one thing, two things, three things? One thing? Okay. I'll call it Y.
A hash.
Yeah, okay. So this should be clear enough, but this is the output. This is the input. And this is the function or the algorithm or whatever. This is the hash itself. Okay. So I have a bunch of questions about this. I don't know where to start, but let's just start with how big is the input?
As big as you want.
Any length.
Okay, so one of the key characteristics of a hash function is it can accept an input of any length itself. Okay. Normally, we use some math notation and we say it's a bit string, so it's either 0 or 1. How many bits do we have? We usually write as an exponent. So like if I put 10 here, that would mean a bit string of length 10. And if I want it to be infinite, then I'll write a star. Okay, so that's all that notation means. It just means a bit string of any length itself.
Or is there like space on the computer again?
Yeah, it could be. So you can hash the entire contents of your hard drive. And that's not something that's crazy. Like operating systems might do that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay.
Reserve a hard drive just for a hash? Like one whole big hard drive?
You could hash the contents of a hard drive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it could be the input to the hash function. Yeah. Okay, what about the output? Size.
You can define it, 256 or 92.
Okay, it depends on what? It depends on the message. It depends on the hash function itself, okay? Let's say I fix this hash function. So I'm using SHA-256 or SHA-2 or SHA-3 or whatever. What can you tell me about the output length? Okay, will it always be 256? Okay, so a hash function will always have the same output. I'm going to leave it as D. So I'll say a bit string of length D. And D is defined by the hash function itself. Okay, so different hash functions have different output lengths. But the main visual that I want you to get is you have an infinite space of messages. And every single message in here is being mapped onto a very small finite state of just D. Okay? Now what that means is it possible for two messages to end up at the same output?
Yes.
It has to be the case. Okay? It cannot possibly not be the case because the number of inputs is bigger than the numbers of outputs. Okay? So it has to be the case that some outputs collide and they end up at the same input. Okay? So we call that a collision, and that will be important with what we want a hash function to do, but for now. Okay. Let's say that I have a message, say the content of my hard drive, I hash it today. Then I come back tomorrow, my hard drive didn't change, I hash it again. Do I get the same output or do I get a different output? Is it a random function or is it a deterministic?
It's a different output.
Okay. Who thinks same and who thinks different? Different?
It's different.
Okay, put your hand up if you think different. If you think same. If you don't know, haven't taken the course yet. Okay, that's fine.
I would say same if it's only the file content that didn't get deleted by the OS system when it booted.
Okay, I'm going to give you the answer. The answer is the winners are same. Okay, so a hash function has no randomness. It always will give the same output. It's only based on the input itself. It's okay. So we call it deterministic.
So in a operating system that hashes every password, it's the salt that's going to make it different, right?
Okay, so that's a great example. What if I hash a password? And so now the server is only storing the hash of the password. They're not storing the password itself.
Yeah.
If I come back later and I say, this is what I'm telling you my password is, it will take it, it will hash it, it will compare it to the hash it has stored. First off, if this is not deterministic, that doesn't work. Because the second time I hash it, I get a completely different answer, even if the password's the same. So they have to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
Then if you want, say you want the hash to be different, okay, you can cheat. How do you cheat? You just add randomness here,
It is salt.
okay? We call it a salt normally. It depends on the context itself. And if you always choose a random salt, you start with the same message and then choose a random salt, and you don't remember the salt or anything like that, then you will get a different output every single time. Okay? So whatever randomness you want from a hash function, if you want it, you got to put it in the input. You can't do it. Okay? Another slight thing, I use this notation here. This, I mean concatenation. And so if you say you have 5 things and you want to hash them, you can hash them, but the hash function expects one thing. So you just put them, start to finish. Like you take the bytes of the first one, maybe you have a delimiter in front of them, but it's going to, at the end of the day, it's hashing what it thinks is a single string. It doesn't have a concept of 5 things. Okay, so that's on you to put those 5 things together. Is this a secret function, or does everyone know what this function is? Okay, so this is a basic principle of cryptography. In the very early days of crypto, people thought we should probably have secret functions because it's going to be harder to reverse engineer and things like that. And then there was a principle that came along. The name escapes my name, or does someone know? Yeah, Kirchhoff's principle. Thank you. And it basically says, no, you should make all the functions public. Everyone can inspect them. Then scientists can work for 10 or 20 years trying to break them. If they don't break them in 10, 20 years, you feel like they're probably pretty good, and then you can use them itself. Okay, so a hash function is it's deterministic, and it's like open or transparent. Everyone knows the algorithm itself. You can study it, you can write it, you can code it up, you can find libraries that code it up. How many hash functions are there in the world? So there's probably lots. Usually what happens is the governments get involved and they say, we're going to create standards for hash functions. And so one organization that does that is in the United States. It's called NIST. They hold a competition. Cryptographers submit designs. They test them. They're looking for a bunch of things like, is it fast on software? Is it fast on hardware? Is it fast in firmware? Does it take a lot of memory? There's all sorts of criteria. How's its security and things like that? And then they kind of choose a winner. But they usually give a short list before they choose a winner. And so any hash function on the short list is usually really good. And you sometimes see those used. And then you see the winners themselves used a lot as well. So the winning hash function right now, according to NIST, is called SHA-3. It's a family, so there's SHA-2, SHA-1 hash functions. And
call with a Y in it. I think what I'm talking about.
Blake?
No, it's like
That's not a hash.
It's, on Linux, they use that on the newer version of Liquid. It's a hashing algorithm. Liquid? Is that the one?
On native to Liquid.
Maybe it's like because when you look at the hash in the shadow file, you see a Y there. Then those ones.
I see.
think that's like one of the newer algorithms. Maybe it's the one you're talking about.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know off the top of my head what that is, but yeah. And then different countries have different hash functions. So like Russia has done some work on standardizing. I believe China has as well. And so you might see different hash functions standardized by different governments. There's also people who don't like NIST. They think it's corrupt or whatever, and then they may have their own hash functions themselves. They don't trust the organization. But most of the internet, most of the protocols you will see in this course run, if you're getting the latest version of that protocol, it's going to use SHA-3. So everywhere you see a hash, if you want to think of a concrete example, think of SHA-3. Okay, so this is what a hash function looks like, what goes in, what comes out. We call this input. Sometimes you see the term preimage. So preimage just means the input, and then the output is sometimes called the image. Okay, what does it actually do? So this is what it looks like, what its input-output behavior is, but like what do you use it for?
It's to basically, it's for the integrity, basically.
Okay, so it relates to integrity, that's true.
Because it's a one-way function, so when you hash, let's say, a signature, you can basically know it's.
Okay, that's a slightly different, that's another property, yeah.
To transform really big files or like big content into like some fixed length.
Okay, so that's a great example. So the basic idea is it's kind of like a fingerprint. Like I have a fingerprint, it's unique to me. It's a lot smaller than my entire body. So if you want to store me, you could store my fingerprint as opposed to storing everything, kind of thing. So that's the idea. So let's say I want to store, or I want a reference to a large piece of data, and later I want to maybe check that that data is exactly the same, it hasn't changed. What I could do is I could keep a copy of the data, then later I get the new data and then I compare them, okay? but that's a lot of data. I have to store a lot of data. So what I use a hash function for instead is to create a smaller fixed length fingerprint of that data, and I just store the fingerprint. Later, if I want to compare it to something else, I take the hash of what I'm comparing it to, and I just compare the two hashes. Okay? So that's it. So what it's used for is kind of like you can think of it as fingerprinting data.
In the terms of in the operating system for the passwords, it's sort of to mask the actual real password so that only the user knows it, so that and then.
Okay, so there is a second feature of hash functions. So the first one, this kind of relates to the integrity property.
Yeah.
So you can compare fingerprints rather than comparing the raw data itself. Okay, hashes are also a one-way function we mentioned. So you go forward, but you can't go backwards. So you can use it sort of to hide things as well. So if I store a hash of something and you are able to steal the hash of it, you can't go backwards and get the actual data itself. Okay, so passwords are the main example of where that's used. What websites will do is they'll store a hash of the password rather than storing the password itself. Then you can't go backwards and get the raw password itself. But because it's a deterministic function, you can always guess. So I can feed a lot of guesses, like a dictionary, into the hash function, brute force it, and then if I ever see an output that matches, then I found your password. So people talk about cracking passwords. There's a related concept of rainbow tables where people do this. And I talk about this in other courses. I won't go through those details now. But it can also be used to hide data.
If you add salt, you can avoid the rainbow table, right?
Yeah, so the salt, what it does is it forces, okay, I'll go through the details a bit. I won't test you on this, but just for your interest. Let's say I brute force a bunch of guesses, like a dictionary. Then I have all my guesses. It took me a lot of work to create that rainbow table, right? But now that I've done that rainbow table, say for SHA-3, let's say you have some passwords that you want to crack, I can just give you my table. You don't have to redo the table itself, okay? So one person does the table for SHA-3, or a bunch of people, and then they put it on BitTorrent and everyone shares it, and now no one ever has to do it again. What Salt does is it ruins that. So what it does is it doesn't stop you from generating a rainbow table. It just means that the rainbow table for the password you're trying to crack and the rainbow table that I generated last week for the password I was trying to crack are probably different because the salts are different. Yeah. So the salt doesn't, that's all it does. It stops you from being able to share your work. So you have to do your own rainbow table for everything that you see. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, security. So let's just write down quickly what we expect from this. Okay, there's 3 properties. People have already mentioned them, but maybe you can spit out what do I expect in terms of how this function behaves, in terms of what am I not allowed to do. I'm looking at this function. Nobody in the world should be able to do 3 things with this function.
Collision resistance?
Okay, so one thing is I shouldn't be able to find a collision. So I mentioned that because the message space, the input space is much bigger than the output space, there are going to be messages that create the same output, that they collide. Okay, if I can find a collision, let's say it's a hash of a file, I find another file that hashes to the same value, then I can convince you that this other file is the right file instead of the one that it actually is. Okay, so collision resistance is the opposite of that. And it basically says it's infeasible. So everything in crypto you can break if you have infinite computing power, almost exceptionally. There's a few things that are unconditionally secure, but I think everything we'll see here. If you have infinite computing power, you can break it. But if you only have all the computers in the world and the lifetime of the universe, then you won't be able to break it. Okay? So that's what we mean by infeasible. Infeasible means it takes a really, really long time. Not quite infinite time, but so close to infinite time that it might as well be infinite.
Even with like a supercomputer?
Even with every supercomputer on Earth running for the lifetime of the universe. Yeah. Unless if there's weaknesses in the algorithm that we don't know about. So quantum's a separate thing. Let's talk about that later. But quantum computing basically breaks these 2 things and it doesn't touch these things. And there are ways of doing these 2 things that are post-quantum. They're just kind of new, and because they're only 10 years old, people aren't comfortable yet with them enough to say we should switch. The other thing is there's a big performance hit. So these things are way faster, even though they're not resistant to quantum computing. Okay, so it should be infeasible to find M1 and M2 not equal to M1 such that the hash of M1 equals the hash of M2. Okay, so I shouldn't be able to find two messages that produce the same hash. Okay, so that's collision resistance. Another property? Okay, one way. So the technical term we use is pre-image resistance. But one way is kind of the informal way of saying it. So given y equals h of some m, find m. Compute m. Okay, there's one other property. It's kind of obscure. I don't know if anyone knows it. So there's a variant of collision resistance that we sometimes call weak collision resistance. And sometimes it's also called second pre-image resistance. I'll just put PI for pre-image resistance. Okay, and it's very close to collision resistance, but it basically says given y equals h of m. Actually, no, I should actually pull this out of my notes and say it right.
Is it the one where it's given any value, you can find it undervalue? Undervalue with the
Yeah, I just can't remember if you're given the output or if you're given another input. So yeah, it's actually formally say with the input.
Find it when it's given to you.
So you're given a message M1, find M1 not equal to M2 such that the hash of M1 equals the hash of M2. Okay, so it's exactly the same as collision resistance. The only difference is here you control M1 and M2. You can choose M1 to be anything, you can choose M2 to be anything. Here, you're given one of the two, and you have to find another one that matches it. Okay? It turns out it's significantly easier if you control both of them because of something called the birthday paradox that I won't go through the details of itself. Okay? But this tends out to be an easier property to achieve than this one. Okay? Weak is weird. It's from the perspective of the designer of the algorithm. So this is like the easier property to beat, and this is the harder property. So if I design a hash function and I just have the weak property, my hash function isn't as strong as if I had this property, because this property is a lot easier to achieve. Okay. If I want to do brute force, for either of these two, I basically try D messages until I get the right thing that I want out, okay? Because the output is size D. I just try D of them, and then I'm done. But for this one, I only have to try the square root of D. So it's a lot less than D itself. Okay, mainly we probably won't focus so much on this, but you'll see these two things that show up at various points in the crypto protocols. And I'll remind you what they mean and things that at that point. Any questions about this, hash functions and things like that? Okay, let's take a break. So it's 7:05-ish. Let's come back at 7:15, and then we'll pick it up from there. All right, so the next topic we'll talk about is randomness. Very important topic in crypto. What is randomness? Anyone want to tell me what it is?
It changes every time. I mean, it changes into something like that's not the same every time.
Okay, so a clock changes every time.
Yeah,
Is it
but
random?
No, it's repeating the same.
Okay. All right. So the measure of randomness that we like is basically it's hard to predict. Okay, so it's unpredictable. let's say I want to predict something and I want to give it a number. What kinds of numbers do I write down to reflect my prediction of what's going to happen?
You want it to be between a certain, in a range.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird question. I'll just give you the answers. What I'm thinking of is probabilities, right? So probabilities is how we like say, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I think it's going to happen with a certain probability, okay? If something is random, let's talk about data now. So I'm going to write down a string, and we'll keep it simple. We'll talk about bits. And I tell you that this bit string is random. What that means is the probability that this was a 0 is 50%,
Yes.
and the probability this is 1 is 50%.
Yeah.
Okay? So the probability that it's 0, I'll say b for bit equals 0 equals 50%, or 1 over 2 because there's 2 options, and the probability that b equals 1 also equals 50%. Let's say it was 60-40. Would that be random?
Less random.
Okay, I like that answer. So do I know what the bit string is coming? Let's say I have a coin and I flip it, and 60% of the time it's heads, 40% of the time it's tails. Can I tell you what the flips are going to be?
No.
No, so it's still random,
Yeah, it is.
but somehow it's less random. Okay, so what we need is kind of like a measure of like how, it's not just, things aren't just random or not, they have a degree of randomness. Okay, I'm not going to teach you what that measurement is, but I'll tell you what it's called. So we call it entropy. So it's basically a measure of how random something is. It's measured in bits, that's the unit. And let's say the entropy of something, confusingly we use H for entropy as well, so it also doubles as hash function, but I'll just put ench instead. Let's say I say the entropy of X is, I don't know, Y. What that means is that the amount of randomness in X is the same as if I flipped a coin, like a 50-50 fair coin, Y times. Okay, so if I tell you the entropy of this is 50 bits, that means the amount of randomness is the same as you would get if you flipped a coin 50 times. Okay. So this is equivalent 50 coin flips. If I flip a coin once, I get some amount of randomness, 1 bit. If I flip a coin 5 times, I get 5 bits of randomness. Is 5 coin flips more random than 1 coin flip?
Yes.
It is. Okay, so if I flip a coin 5 times, it's harder to predict what that sequence of 5 coin flips will be than it is to predict what 1 flip would be. Okay, with 1 flip, I have a 50-50 chance. With 5, I have 1 over 2 to the power of 5, if you want to be precise about it, but it's a lot harder to predict those 5 things. Okay, so entropy can grow and it can shrink. Okay, when you choose a password, let's say it's random. Let's say the machine chooses it for you instead of you choosing it, right? A 12-character password is going to be more random than a 10-character password. If I'm going to do exhaustive search and try every password until I find it, I'm going to have to go through more combinations the longer it is, okay? So the entropy grows, the amount grows as well, okay? The amount of work to try every single value works, okay? If it's human chosen, it's not full entropy. It's still it's kind of random. It's kind of like the biased coin. I don't know immediately what your password is, but I know it's a lot more likely to be certain things than other things.
Yeah.
Okay? And so that means the entropy is less than what it should be for something of its length, but it's still not completely predictable either. So it's sort of in between. Okay? So entropy is that sort of measurement of sort of how random things are. We can't always say what the entropy of something is. You can try and apply it to everything, but in order to know what it is, you need to know basically the probability of every outcome. Then you can compute what the entropy is. And there's some things we don't know. Like I don't know the probability distribution of passwords exactly. I have some data about it. I can approximate it. But anyways, when we choose cryptographic keys, which we're coming to, we want to make sure they're maximum entropy. So that means if I'm choosing a key and it's 128 bits, I want 128 coin flips. I don't want something that's looks like it's 128 bits long, but because every bit was biased and it was like 80% chance of 1 and 20% of 0, it's equivalent to a key that's a lot shorter. Okay, the amount of randomness is equivalent to something. So I want things that are maximal entropy as well. Where do we get maximum entropy from? So I want a cryptographic key. I want it to be 128 bits. How do I get a 128-bit key that's truly random? Truly meaning like maximum entropy. So I could literally flip coins. And there are some things, you can buy things off Amazon that they're not going to be coins, they'll be like a dice or something like that. And it'll be a bunch of dice and you shake the whole thing up and then it gives you certain combinations and you can get entropy that way. Okay, where else can I get it from?
There is the auction.
Sorry, auction?
Yeah.
Like
Online.
an online auction?
Yeah.
How do you get randomness out of it? Oh, you mean like a lottery?
Yeah, for example.
Yeah.
You have a lot of randomness during that process.
Okay. So there's two things. Yeah, so auctions, you can base it on human behavior.
Yeah.
So if there's things that are too hard to predict, like stock prices and things like that, you could try and use that and harvest it as randomness. The government chooses random numbers for the lottery every time they run a lottery. Casinos choose random numbers for lots of games. And there it's physical, right? So they have like these machines with like balls that like spin in the air and they pull them out and things like that. And you have a roulette wheel at like a casino and things like that. What about like a slot machine thing that I sit down?
You can't get perfect randomness from that apparently in computer software. That's
Okay.
what I learned.
So computers are deterministic. Okay, they run the software that it was come with. Okay, so it comes with software and they run it. And software is never going to produce randomness. Okay, now do you have a question? Sorry? Okay, yeah, so a lava lamp is another physical thing. And so there was like people that had webcams that pointed at lava lamps and they would, if you don't know what a lava lamp is, it's kind of like a, I don't know how you describe it, but it's a light that has these like blobs that sort of like move around and things like that. Okay, so what do computers do? So they do two things. The first thing is there are ways of getting things that are close enough to randomness from hardware, not from software. So a lot of computers are going to come with onboard hardware chips that are noisy or things like that, and they'll use that and they'll harvest that for randomness. And the second source is, even though computers are deterministic, they're very complicated. And sometimes, remember, our definition of randomness is sort of unpredictable. So even though they're following a pattern, the exact time that one thing completes or another thing completes or a user moves the mouse, things like that, you can't always predict that, okay? And there's enough unpredictableness in a computer that if you sort of measure everything, like hardware stuff like what's the voltage right now in the computer, and software things like this person's moving the mouse around, like exactly to what pixel are they moving, it all is like hard to predict, okay? So all of that gets kind of harvested together into a big pool, and then what they do is they sort of compress it into something that's considered random, okay? The thing they use is, it's technically not a crypto thing, but we use it in crypto. It's called an extractor. Looks very much like a hash function. It takes one input. It produces one output. The input can be infinite length. The output is fixed length. Its purpose, though, is different. Its purpose is, this is like a pool of somewhat randomness, so not max entropy, but enough randomness, more than d bits of randomness somewhere in it, okay? So there's usually a lot more. So you want, so D here could be something like 256 bits. So the output would be like a key length. Like say I want to generate a key. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these measurements of my computer. I'm hoping that there's like way more than D bits of entropy inside of X. And then what I want to do is I want to compress it down into something that's D length that's statistically random. I can't say it's truly random, but it's statistically true. And the technical term for true random is uniform random. So uniform random means that every bit has an equal probability of being 0, 1, 50, 50%. Okay? Length of it is D. D you can choose, but normally we're doing things like we're generating seeds or keys itself. Okay? So this is how your computer works. This is a complicated algorithm. It does all sorts of weird things. And the stuff that goes into it is also weird. And now with like quantum computing and things like that, there's some interest in like doing quantum number generators and things like that. And so, but
where you could have if you want to create like the most random number, you have a REST API that calls a quantum computer that generates it.
yeah. So there's
That's
some
the most random type you could get.
exactly. There is some true physical randomness that quantum gives you that I don't understand. But yeah. Okay, so this is an extractor. So basically, we take a big pool of randomness, we kind of squeeze it into a short string that's truly random itself. Okay, this can be like kind of semi-random, and then it kind of squishes it into it. A lot of people in real life, we're going to see it or next week, is they'll just use a hash function as an extractor. Theoretically, doesn't have exactly the right properties, but it's very close. And so people abuse hash functions and they use hash functions for all sorts of things. But this is one thing that you'll see that's used in a protocol like HTTPS or TLS. At a certain point, they need a number here, and so they're just going to hash it in order to basically extract the randomness from that value. Okay? Anyways, I won't put a lot of emphasis on this. It just kind of shows up in one place. Yeah. Yeah.
What is the main difference between the extractor and the extractor?
So the hash, it's in the properties itself. So the hash functions has all of these properties. None of these properties say anything about whether the output should be random or not directly, yeah? And so that's the difference. So the extractor here, it's just the security property is that the output is uniformly random kind of thing. But most people assume there's even a formal thing called the random oracle model where you model hash functions as random outputs. But it's an assumption that a hash function works like this, and it's not really tested. Like NIST doesn't test SHA-3 to see whether it exhibits the properties that you want from this. Yeah, but it is hard to see that if it's not a random output, why you can get some of these properties, especially collision resistance, right? Because if there's no randomness in the output, then you're going to have biases in terms of messages colliding, and it seems like it's going to make this easier. Yeah, but formally you can't link the two together. Okay. Now, the other one that you see a lot more often that's more common is basically this in reverse. It's kind of the opposite. I'm going to call it a PRG, which stands for pseudo-random. Sometimes it's a PRNG for random number, but now we just tend to say random generator. Okay, so a PRG is, like I say, it's almost the same. It has an input, a single output. But here it's kind of the opposite. What I do is I start with an input that's fixed length. Okay, you can think of it as a key. We tend to use the word seed instead of key, but it's more or less a key. It's something that should say secret for most of the places that you're going to use a PRG for. And what it gives you is it gives you an infinite number of bits that are random enough. So random enough, just let me say it's, we rewrite indistinguishable from random.
Is this
Yeah.
one of those like Python or C libraries that are like built in to the programming language that you can use to generate a random number type of thing?
Okay, so there's two things that invokes. So the first thing is, let's say you're writing in whatever Java and you say, give me a random number. Where does it come from? There's usually there's a lot of programming languages have two pools of randomness that you can draw from. One of them will just generate something like, it will give you X essentially up here. It will just give you something. It's not actually that random. And if you use it for cryptographic purposes, you can get in a lot of trouble because people can predict them. And there's lots of papers breaking cryptography where people did not do this correctly. Mm-hmm. If you call the secure randomness, then what your operating system is doing is it's actually doing both of these things together. So it maybe just to make it clear that often these things are chained together, let me just tweak this, and I'll call the input here Y, and I'll call the output Z or something like that. So you start with a big pool of randomness, you get your seed, you can press it down to like a truly random seed, you put that into your pseudo-random generator, and then you sort of blow it back up. So it's kind of like you shrink down the randomness, you concentrate it so it's very concentrated, and then once it's concentrated, you can expand it out. Yeah. And once you have this, then you can, so like say I need 10 keys. I'm doing Bitcoin, and every time I do a transaction, I need a new key. I don't want to remember 100 keys. I want to remember one key, which I'll feed into the PRG, and the PRG will give me the first key, and then I'll run it and get the second key, and I'll run it again and get the third key, kind of thing. Yeah. This also gives you a very simple encryption algorithm. So what I can do is I can call the seed a key, generate a bunch of random bits, take the data that I want to encrypt, do an operation to combine them called an XOR operation, and that's it. And then when the person gets the ciphertext, they do the same thing. They start with the key, they put it through the PRG, they generate the exact same stream of bits. XOR is symmetric, so if you XOR twice by the same thing, you go back to what you started with, and so it goes back to basically what it started with. Okay, so that's called a stream cipher. It's something that we'll see as well. But anyways, that's one area where PRGs are used, but they're used for all sorts of things. Okay, PRGs also have, let me write down the security properties. So so Z is indistinguishable from random, which I already have. And the second property is it's like a hash function, which is given Z, it's infeasible to compute Y. Okay, so if I see some of the output of the pseudo-random generator, I can't find the seed. Why is this important? This is important because sometimes you're generating randoms that should be secret, and sometimes you're generating randoms that you're going to use that are public. Okay, if people can look at your public randomness, reverse out what the seed should be that would produce that public randomness, then they can run the PRG and generate all the randomness, including your secrets as well. Okay, so you can't go backwards. The other thing I should mention, it's probably important to mention for both of these, it's the same thing that we said about a hash function, which is that these are deterministic functions. So if you start with the same input, you always get the same output. So there's no cheating, there's no randomness in PRG itself. PRG is just an algorithm. If you start it with the same seed, you'll get the same string of bits out. So there's none of the randomness is in PRG. All the randomness has to be in the seed itself. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Well, it will give you poor. If you put poor randomness in, you'll get poor randomness out. So we'll say this is deterministic. Okay, good. Any questions about randomness?
Is there any connection between solving and randomness?
So you could use this to generate your salts. So you want your salts to be max entropy. And then, yeah, where you get your salts from could be from a PRG itself. So that's the connection. Other questions? Okay. All right, let's talk about encryption. So you probably, if you haven't taken 6110, you probably thought that it's a course about encryption. Cryptography is a course about encryption, but you see that there's a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with encryption that we're still learning. And there's a bunch of things, too, that we'll learn that also aren't encryption themselves. I just want to make sure I don't skip something. Okay, so I have a function. It's called encrypt. Great. What inputs do I have? How many inputs does this function take? So a message, so one. Let's take any other inputs. A key. Okay, so it actually is going to have two inputs. So we're going to have a message, and we're going to have a key. What do I get out the other end? It is an output. It's called a ciphertext. Is it one thing? What does it look like? Okay. All right. Okay. How big's the key? Is it? Do I choose the length? Is it always the same length? Okay. So again, let's say I fix this. So I'm using AES 256, which is an example of an encryption algorithm. Yeah, so it is, the main thing I want to get across is that it's fixed. So I don't care what it is, but it's 256 bits, which in bytes is whatever it is. I'll call this K. The point is it's length. Actually, I'll call it L. That's normally what we call it. Or I could follow my notes and call it whatever I call my notes. I call it L. Okay, so it is a fixed length. The algorithm itself, the one that you decide, so you'll go to NIST and say, give me an encryption algorithm. They'll say you should use AES, and then AES will tell you, okay, there's actually different versions of it, but there's this version that has 256-bit keys. We think it's secure for 30 years, even if there's quantum computing. You say, great, I'm going to use that. Your keys are always now 256 bits, period. Okay, so the key is the same length. How about the message itself? Okay, so trick question. I'm going to pencil it in as any length, but it's technically not true, but we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, encryption itself. Public, does everyone know the encryption algorithm, or is it a secret algorithm that only NIST knows and they're not telling? Okay, so it's open. If I encrypt the same message with the same key twice, do I always get the same ciphertext? Is it deterministic or is it randomized? Okay. What about the output that I get? So I get a ciphertext out. How big is the ciphertext? Is it like a hash function where it's always 256 bits? Okay, so usually whatever your message is that goes in, it's going to be the same length. So I'm going to write it as 0, 1, star, meaning that it can be any size, but I'm going to add the restriction that it will be the size of C, which I'll denote with straight lines here, like kind of like absolute value. That's usually what we use for the size of things, is equal to the size of M. Okay, so if your message is a certain amount, then the output is also going to be the same input. Okay, encryption isn't that great unless if you have decryption. First off, let's say, what does encryption do? So this is how it behaves. These are the inputs and outputs, but what's the purpose of encryption?
Confidentiality, so nobody can tell what your message is.
Okay, so if I send M, say to you, I'm going to encrypt it with a key. I'm going to output C, and I'm going to send C. I'm going to tell everyone C. I'm going to send it across the public internet. Anyone can write down C, and if they write down C, there should be no way to reverse it and get out what the original message was, unless if you have the key, okay? If nobody can do it ever, you could actually use a hash function for that. So why don't I want to send you a secret, why don't I just hash it and send it to you?
Because it's one way.
Because it's one way, the other person can't get the message back. Okay? So what we want is something like a hash function. We want something like pre-image resistance, like a hash function that hides the message. But what we want is also a trapdoor that opens it back up. Okay? And this is also why the message space and the output space have to be the same. If there's collisions, you can't decrypt because you have too many messages to decrypt to. So the number of messages that you can encrypt and the number of ciphertexts have to be equal. Okay? So there's one message for every ciphertext. Okay. So security, we need to be a little more formal, but for now, actually let me write it informally as the purpose is to hide M, but only from anyone who doesn't know K. Okay, so what we have is, what if you do know K and you want to get M back? We're going to have the opposite operation, which is called decryption. It takes the ciphertext in, it takes the key in, and it returns the message. Everything here is the same, like in terms of lengths and things like that. The note I'll put on the key is it's the same K as encryption. We're going to see a fancier kind of encryption in a few minutes where we have different keys, one key to encrypt and one key to decrypt. But for now, it's the same key to encrypt and to decrypt. It's a private key, yeah. So this is secret. The only people that should know it is the sender and the receiver. Whoever wants to encrypt and whoever wants to decrypt, they share the key itself. Okay, so there's a few things that I need to note about this. First off, I'll mention that there are different kinds of encryption. So this, we call it symmetric key. Symmetric just means that the encryption and decryption key are the same thing. In practice, there's a thing called a one-time pad. It's a theoretical thing. We won't talk about it here. In practice, you're going to see something like a stream cipher, which we already talked about. A stream cipher, the way you encrypt is just you run a PRG. You run it, you get something Z, so it's the same length as the message that you want to encrypt. You XOR them together. And then the decryption algorithm does the same thing. And then there's something called a block cipher. Anyone know the name of a stream cipher? Say louder. So yeah, that's not a name of a one, but yeah.
Fine,
Not familiar with that.
that was one of the ones that talked about it.
Okay. So an older one was popular, you sometimes saw it in TLS, was called RC4. And then the one that's now you see sometimes is called Cha-Cha-20. So these are examples of stream ciphers. Block ciphers, anyone know the name of one? Okay, AES is the most common one. And then there's earlier ones like DES and things like that. AES is more popular than stream ciphers. AES is basically like kind of the industry standard, okay? Now I said that you can encrypt messages of any length, okay? We have AES, it's a deterministic algorithm. How does AES process, say I have a file that's a gigabyte, I want to encrypt it. How does AES sort of, I don't want to go into the details of how it works under the hood, but just give me a sense of how is it going to encrypt something that's like a gigabyte.
Is it cutting everything in blocks?
Okay, so the first thing it's going to do is it's going to cut it into blocks or chunks. That's where the name block cipher comes from, okay? So block cipher says that we're going to split it into blocks. Usually a block length would be the same as the key length. It's not strictly necessary, but think of a block as 256 bits, okay? Now, technically, AES can only encrypt 256 bits. Okay, so the input to AES is a 256-bit string, and the output is a ciphertext, which is 256 bits. It could be 128 or something else, but the point is it's fixed. It's not infinite. Okay? A stream cipher is technically infinite because you can run your PRG for an infinite amount of times. A block cipher, you can only encrypt a block. Okay? In real life, we don't want to just limit ourselves to blocking or to encrypting things that are 256 bits. Okay? So what do? So the answer is we run AES in what's called a mode of operation, which basically says how are you going to chain together a bunch of AES 256 bits encryptions. So to go from this, let me denote it like this. I'll say AES plus what's called the mode of operation will give you what we sort of want, which is like an infinite.
Like a stream cipher?
Like a stream cipher, yeah. Okay, the simplest mode of operation possible is you take the first 256 bits, you encrypt it, that's your first 256 bits of your ciphertext. You take your next 256 bits, you encrypt it, that's your next 256 bits, and you just keep going until you run out of bits to encrypt. Okay, does anyone know the name of that mode of operation? Okay, so it's called ECB, Electronic Codebook, and it is not secure. Okay, why is it not secure? Any guesses?
Because you can pre-calculate 56 bits and just try to find it in the encrypted string.
Okay, you can't pre-compute because I still don't know the key.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're close to something.
We also know the message size, so we can
Yeah, so the message size is fixed.
we have some sort of information.
Correct. But you still don't know the key, so that's still going to scramble everything up. So the ciphertext is going to look different.
It could repeat itself.
Okay, so what happens if, first off, AES deterministic, right? We said that. What if I encrypt the same message block? Like say I have a message that repeats a lot, and I always encrypt the same block. What's going to happen is I'm going to have the same output block as a ciphertext. Okay, it's going to be completely random, so it's going to map the input to a completely random output, but it will always be the same. Okay, so what's a like kind of data that maybe would have chunks of things that are 256 bits long? Think of an image. Think of like a pixel. Okay, so let's say that you're going to encrypt it pixel by pixel. Every time you have a certain shade of red, it's going to map to some random color. But it's always going to map to the same random, that exact same pixel will map to the exact same random color, okay? So therefore, you could see patterns in it. And I'll just show you, because I know Wikipedia has a example of this. So this, for example, is the Linux Penguin. This is the plain text. I encrypt it with AES, or I don't know what it is. It's AES, but I do it in ECB mode. You can see like the white and stuff map to, let's take the belly. So the white maps to some random color that looks kind of like yellow. But because all of these white pixels are the same, they map to the same color itself, okay? So it's kind of scrambled up and noisy, but at the same time, you can clearly see what the image is itself, okay? So this isn't good enough, okay? We can't encrypt this way. So what I want is, the reason this is breaking down is because whenever I encrypt the same pixel, I get the same pixel out. So what I want to happen is when I encrypt the same pixel 5 times, I actually want a different output every 5 times, okay? But the problem with that is what do you do at decryption? So if one pixel could map to 5 different pixels, right? Then how is the person going to decrypt it? They look at one of the 5 pixels, how do they know which one it is, okay? So this is what a mode of operation does, is it kind of chains together encryptions, and it usually takes the value from the previous block and kind of feeds it into the next block. And the other thing it will do is it will introduce randomness. So usually with a mode of operation, we expect to see 3 inputs, we have the message, we have the key, and then we have a value that's just random. It's chosen, and it makes this encryption unique. We call it an initialization vector or an IV. You can think of it as a salt. And we send that in the plain text or clear text to the recipient. So it's not a secret. Okay, so this is not a secret. But basically it guarantees that if I encrypt the same message, even with the same key, every time I encrypt, I'm going to choose a new IV. And because my IV will be different, the ciphertext will be different. Okay, so you're not going to recognize encryptions of the same messages themselves. Okay, and then you also have this chaining that takes the IV and mixes it in, and then there's different ways of chaining things together. Okay, so what are some modes of operation? So we have ECB. That's the one that's like really not secure. So we say it is one-time secure. I'll try and define what these terms mean. Anyone know a name of something else? Yeah, so CBC is a good example. And CBC is, we call it CPA, secure.
CBC or CBD?
CBC, but there are, yeah, sorry, thank you. Yeah, I'll fix that. And does anyone know like the strongest level of encryption, which we call CCA secure, an example of it? It's the one that you would see in like HTTPS or like a real world protocol. No, so it's called GCM is one example. It's the most common one. And what GCM does is it combines an encryption with the next thing that we're going to talk about with a MAC. So it does an encryption and a MAC at once at the same time together, and then that gives you the highest level of security. Okay, so because you need MACs to talk about CCA secure, I will define these three terms in a second, but I want to talk about MACs before I define it. Okay, so security. We have OTS, CPA, CCA, and I'll define in a second. Before I do, any other questions about AES block ciphers? Okay. Okay, the next thing we have is a MAC, or it's a message authentication code. Okay, maybe I've been doing it backwards. Let's start with what it is. Why do we have this thing called a MAC? What did we use it for?
It's sort of similar to a hash, but it adds the non-repudiation and the authentication.
Those are great terms. What does it mean?
Non-repudiation means
No, digital signature has non-repudiation.
but it's
Okay. So this is something that's kind of like a fingerprint. It sounds like a hash for that. It's kind of like an error correction code. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send my message, and then I'm going to send some extra bits that go along with it, and it serves as a check on the message itself. So you're going to receive something. You're going to receive what allegedly was the message I sent, and this sort of error correction thing that's added onto the end. I'll call it a tag. So you receive this tag that goes along with it. You're going to run a little algorithm, and the algorithm is going to say that tag matches that message, so it doesn't look like any bits were lost or flipped. Or it's going to say that tag does not match that message. It looks like something went wrong. Maybe bits were flipped or you're missing bits, and you should ask the person to send it again, essentially.
Yeah,
Okay.
because the hash, anybody can just use the same message and the same.
Okay. So let's start with a hash. What if I send a big message, and then I put the hash of the message on the end?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say some bits get flipped in the middle. So it goes across the wire, some bits get flipped. Does the hash protect that message? So you receive the message, you take that message, you hash it, and you compare it to the hash that I sent on the end. Are they going to be different?
Yeah.
They will be different, okay? So it would actually catch it in that case, okay? So if there's any kind of accidental error, you can just do the message and the hash. The problem is, what if the person in the middle is aware of what's happening? They want to change the message, but they also don't want to get caught changing the message, and they know you're using a hash at the end. What they'll do is they'll change the message, they'll hash what the new message is, and then they'll replace the tag at the end with the new hash, and now it all checks. You receive it and you're like, yeah, the hash matches the message. It probably wasn't changed, okay? So a hash isn't quite sufficient. What do we need, though, to fix it?
Protect the hash.
So we want to protect the hash. So what can we do to protect the hash? What can we use?
A Mac.
So we can use a Mac, yeah, but like what?
Digital signature.
So signatures are way stronger. We'll talk about them in a second. How? Yeah. Keep guessing. Okay, what we're going to use is a key. So we're going to introduce the idea of a key. And so now the sender knows a key and the recipient knows a key. And basically you're going to hash the message together with the key. Now you have to be a little careful about how you do this. Hash functions have this like weird property. Some do. So SHA-3 does not have it. But you'll learn probably in 6.1.10 that one design for hash functions, when you look inside of them, is called Merkle-Damgard. There's this attack called a length extension attack, and it breaks this idea that if you just concatenate together keys and messages that you can use them for max. So what you do instead is you kind of do keys and max and you hash them, but then you do an inner hash and then you do an outer hash with the key again, and it's slightly more complicated. We call it an HMAC. But anyways, those are like looking inside the box, which we don't have to do for this course, okay? So a MAC is going to take a message in. It's going to take a key. It's going to output, I'll call it a tag, T.
It's going to be symmetric, right?
And this key will be symmetric. But a little red tape about that in a sec. First, the key, like always, will be like a 256-bit key or whatever you want it to be. The message can be any length, okay, because we want to be able to MAC anything of any length. And because we're using hash functions on the inside, we'll just hash it first anyway, so we can always compress it down to something. But the output is going to be fixed length. So it looks kind of like a hash with a key. If you want to think of it as a keyed hash, that basically is the right idea. It's essentially a hash function with a key. Okay, so let's say that Alice sends a message to Bob. What they're sending is they're sending M, and then they're adding on to MT. Okay, Bob knows K. Alice knows K. All right. And then what Bob is going to do is he's going to take the message that he received, which maybe is the same message that Alice sent. Maybe it got flipped. Okay. And what she's going to do is he's going to take the key that he knows, and he's going to compute the MAC of it. And he's going to ask, when I MAC this with the key, does it equal T or not? Do I get a different T than the T that was sent? Okay. Why can't an adversary break it? So the adversary can go in, they can change M, but then they can also change T. But in order to change T to be right, they need to know K. They don't know K. Okay. So without K, you can't meaningfully change it. You're probably going to change it to something where it doesn't check. And and so the security property essentially for a MAC is going to be that if you don't know K, you can't come up with T for any M. Let me just see if I have a more formal way of saying it. So it's infeasible to create tag T for message M that you can choose. I'll just put chosen, so you can choose any message you want without knowing the key. Okay, so this gives us a way of sending messages and making sure the recipient receives them.
Sorry, please answer.
Yeah.
Is the key the same with Bob's key, Alice's key?
Yeah, so in this case, yeah, so this is they both know the same key
How
itself.
does Bob know the key? Do they like agree beforehand what key to use?
Okay, that's a great question. So there was, I want to circle back to this, but that's literally the next thing I want to talk about. Okay, just hold on to it, and then I'll answer that. So first off, let's just observe that we don't know how they do that, right? Like, say Alice and Bob, they meet in a back alley, they exchange the key. That works, but that requires physical,
To be in the same location?
yeah, they have to physically be together, right? Let's say Alice is me and Bob is Google. I want to have this key shared with Google. How do we end up with the same key, right? So that's like, that was considered, so if you go back into the history of crypto, how to do Max and how to do encryption, people sort of understood, but they couldn't solve that problem. Yeah, that was like the hardest problem, and people actually thought it was impossible. There's no way to solve it, and that's what Diffie-Hellman or
In the secure channel to
Um,
exchange the keys.
yeah, so, sort of. So, actually, should put it in here. I think I meant to put it in, but this is what key exchange or key agreement or key transport will do. So we're going to have another protocol that handles that. And this was like the breakthrough that created the field of encryption or cryptography. Before key exchange, cryptography was just about like military and armies, and they would have like code books, like literally printed books, and they would give you a copy and you would have a copy, and everyone would like rip the page out when they were done and things like that. Yeah. Once this came along, then all of a sudden computers could do it even though they'd never met before. Yeah. So it is, and it's crazy that you can do this, but you can do it. And you'll learn how, I'll show you sort of how it works, but you're mainly going to learn it in 6.1.10. But yeah. Okay. Let's see. There's one other thing I was going to say. What was it? Oh yeah. Notice here there's no encryption either. Okay. Alice sends this message to Bob. Can anyone in the middle read the message? They can.
Yeah.
Okay, it's in plain text. So Macs don't help you at all with encryption. They're not about encryption at all. Okay? So normally we don't use a Mac by itself without encryption. And for reasons that I'll talk about that are based on these security properties, we don't use encryption without a Mac. Okay, you need both in order to give you like a proper secure channel. Okay, so encryption doesn't work very well without a Mac, and if you just have a Mac and no encryption, then everything's in plain text. You can do that if you just care about integrity. Like say I'm downloading a file, I just want to make sure no one sticks malware in it. But if I care about privacy or keeping that file hidden, then I need encryption as well. So encryption and Macs are usually used together, hand in hand. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I don't want to get into the whole security thing. It's like, it's a little longer than a 5-minute discussion. So why don't we just take a break here? I was hoping to get through all of this stuff today, but it's fine. We'll continue it next lecture. And so next lecture, just as a preview, we'll talk about that key agreement or key exchange.
The signatures.
We'll talk about public key encryption. And then the public key version of a Mac is digital signatures as well. Okay, thank you. I'll see you all next week.